All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Transfer Portal Podcast, brought to you by NoContextCFB. I'm your boy Brian. You guys know me. If you've been listening to the pod for a while or watching the pod, you know who I am. But we got two new faces with us. First time joining us, we expanded our crew recently. So we have Kenzie right up here, and then we have Dave. Welcome, guys. Your first time on the pod. You've only been with us for a few days. You know, we just kind of welcome. Glad you guys be part of our show and part of our team. We're excited to get you guys on and see what you guys got to offer. So let's get started on that. You know, let's kind of introduce you guys, or introduce yourselves, I should say. Kenzie, why don't we start with you? What are you about, and welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kinsey. Currently residing in DC. Just accepted a full-time job with DC United, the MLS team, a couple months ago. I'm a videographer for the team, so I'm all about creating content. And I actually, college football was my first true love growing up, not soccer, but obviously I ended up playing soccer instead of football. And I grew to love soccer in a work kind of aspect instead of playing it. So I enjoy that. I love both football and football, and it's definitely a lot of fun being able to create content at a major league level.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Dave, what about you?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Dave. I'm a recent graduate of Penn State, so big Penn State football fan. Don't like James Franklin, don't like Sean Clifford, so this should be very interesting. I'm currently interning for the New York Islanders.
Wow.
And I'm from Long Island, so big Islander fan. They're not doing great this year. They were had 2 good years, now they're kind of stalling this year. But yeah, I'm all about college football. I love football. I'm just a big Penn State fan, and I'm excited for this year. Hopefully, Drew Aller gets some snaps, and we don't see much Clifford.
I like that we're both Big Ten people.
Yeah. Ohio State always dominates us, which is super fun all the time.
Well, I mean, big, I think that nowadays, it's kind of changing of the guard with, I don't think Ohio State will be as dominant as it used to be, but that's a conversation for another day. But all I know is that, we're still the champs. So
yeah,
I'm cool with that. So let's get started on this. It's obviously we're in the slower period of college football. We're after National Signing Day. There isn't much going on, but we do have a couple of things that popped up over the last few days. The first one is Luke Fickell got an extension with Cincinnati. We all know what happened this past season with Cincinnati. They went to the playoff they were the first Group of 5 team to go to the playoff. They've lost, I think, one game, or they had lost one game in 2 seasons before they lost in the playoff. So he signed through 2028, $5 million per year deal through 2028. What are your early reactions to that? Kenzie, we'll start with you.
I mean, well, why wouldn't he get it? It seems like the fairly obvious choice. Who else would they go get? They wouldn't go away from him. And I think that period of time is a good enough test of time to see if he will continue the success, see if the last couple of years have been a fluke. I relate everything back to Nebraska football because that's my lifeline. And I think, like I touched on, it's a good period to see where he can take the team. Obviously, making the college football playoff as a Group of 5 was probably one of their top goals. Now they want to take it further. So I think it's a really good move, in my opinion.
Dave, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that it's a great move for both sides. If you're Cincy, you cannot lose Fickell at all, so you have to lock him up, because I know there were talks of him, if needed, to go to Ohio State, Notre Dame. There were chatter of all that, but if you're Cincinnati, you have to keep the guy. He's been your best head coach in the history of the program. He brought you the playoff, and I think it's going to be a little tough on him without Desmond Ridder, but I do think that they'll squeak out of the American and they'll win the American, because Houston and SMU are always super duper tough, especially when you're playing them on the road. And I know they just Houston also extended Dana Holgerson, so Houston's going to come out firing like they always do. And I'm really intrigued to see what he does with Cincinnati when they move to the Big 12. I think that's going to be as wide open as it always is, and it does help him out that Oklahoma and Texas are leaving.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with both of your points, and it kind of shows, the state of the Group of Five. I know Cincinnati's going to the Big 12 soon, but it's kind of give you the state of the Group of Five. That's three coaches now that have been extended in the Group of Five that they could have left. There's a lot of opportunities for Luke Fickell to leave Cincinnati and go to a bigger program. There's a lot of head coaching jobs out there. Whether he wasn't interested or he wasn't, recruited by those programs, or just a different conversation. But the fact that he decided to stay at Cincinnati, and then we have Jeff Traylor at UTSA, and then like you mentioned, Dana Holgorsen at Houston. These three Group of Five programs who did very well this past season was able to retain their coaches, and that's usually what happens in a Group of Five teams. We've seen it with, we've seen it in years past with these Groups of Five teams who have these great seasons and go to the group New Year's Six Bowl or BCS Bowl, and then their head coach gets poached by a Power Five team, and it kind of fizzles out their momentum at that point. And so with this, we kind of have this, like, can Cincinnati, have they peaked yet, or can they continue, this rise through the ranks of college football? And now that they enter in the Big 12, and you do have that coach that has had success the last couple of years, the future of Cincinnati football, I think is brighter than we realize. I think they have a very good stepping stone. I mean, we think about the last 2 years, their two losses were to Georgia and Alabama. Those are the only there's only two teams they've lost to the last 2 years, which are the last two national champions. So that's pretty good. If your only two losses is to Georgia and Alabama, I mean, you're doing something right. Because you can't be faulted for losing to those teams. Everybody else is losing to those teams too. So yeah. So do you guys think that Clemson has peaked? Do you think it's kind of, are they on the rise, or where do you see the outlook of Cincinnati football the next few years?
You can start.
I think the Big 12 will help be a better realignment test for them. The running joke this year with Cincinnati fans was they are blowing out the good teams in the American, and they struggled with the bad teams in the American. And each year you've seen Cincinnati struggle with the likes of Tulsa, who is a toss-up every week whether they're going to be good. Especially this last year, Tulsa definitely struggled more than the year before with the loss of Collins. But I know that the Big 12 is losing OU and Texas, which, yeah, OU's a loss, I guess. I don't consider Texas much of a powerhouse in the Big 12. I think it'll be tougher competition. They haven't seen offenses that will torch their defense every week like the Big 12 does. So I am very excited to see if they adapt their offense a little bit, how their defense handles. I assume it'll be like a slap in the face maybe the first couple weeks of adjusting to the high octane offenses that are in the Big 12. So that's probably what I'm most excited to see. And I think that they'll obviously do well in the American. I don't know if they'll squeak out of it. I think they have a pretty good resume, recruits, keep on building on what they have. But that's what I'm looking for Cincinnati in the next couple years, especially with doubling down on their coach with the large contract.
Yeah, definitely. Dave, what do you think?
So when we talk about peaking, I would say, yeah, I think they peaked. Because the only step higher that Luke Fickell can take this team is to a national championship and then to win a national championship. But I think they're playing tougher teams in the Big 12. I don't think they'll get back this year because I think they'll lose a game to either Houston or SMU. And as Kenzie said, they're always playing teams like Tulsa and Tulane. They get played tough. And I think that especially once they go to the Big 12, they're going to get beat. They're not going to get beat up, but it always cannibalizes itself. Oklahoma State will be there. Kansas State beats everybody at home somehow. Baylor's still there. It's just I don't see them getting back to where they were this last season. I think they'll be very good in the Big 12. I think they'll contend for a Big 12 title. at the best, but I see them more becoming like a 9-10 win team in the regular season.
Would we be having this conversation of peaking if it wasn't Cincinnati / a group of five? What if it was like Iowa or Minnesota? Like, say Minnesota went on this run that Cincinnati's had the last couple of years. Like, would we have considered Minnesota peaked? Probably. We wouldn't see them coming back, getting back. Or like Washington State going on a run like this, like, because the Pac-12 hasn't shown out well in the new college football playoff era. But I think that's an interesting take too, that we're dissecting Cincinnati's run. Like, have they peaked? Well, would we be dissecting them as hard if they were already in a Power 5 conference? I think it's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Kenzie, that you make. Is we kind of see these groups of 5 teams under a microscope. We did the same thing with UCF when they were going through their run, right? It's kind of like, oh, that's cute, yeah, but what, like, can they keep doing that? It's that's a great point to make. And I mean, like what Dave said, they're going to go into a tougher conference than the Big 12. Like, sure, Texas is leaving, Oklahoma's leaving, but you still have some very good teams in there. Like Dave said, you have Baylor, Kansas State. Even Texas Tech. Texas Tech they're always, they have these years where they're very good and they can beat anybody, and then they go 4-8, and then they go 8-4, and then they go 10-2, and then they go 4-8 again. They're very up and down. So we'll definitely have to. It was very interesting to see that transition into the Big 12 that they make. But I do think that they've opened the door for players and recruits to say, look, you can be successful in the group of 5, or at Cincinnati, or at UTSA, or at Houston. You can be successful here. And they're getting first round picks, Sauce Gardner and Desmond Ridder. He's definitely not our first round pick, but he's definitely on the conversation of being the 3rd or 4th quarterback drafted, maybe 2nd quarterback drafted. So we'll see. But you have that power to say, look, we're getting guys to the league, we're getting into the playoff. Like, let's, you can change that narrative of the group of 5 teams. So I don't want to say, I'm very inclined to say that they've peaked, because like Dave said, it's very hard to, like, the next step would be to win a national championship. And I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. You still have a lot of good teams. We look what we saw from Michigan this year, how they're going to respond next year. So there's a lot of teams in their way, but it is going to be very interesting. And speaking of the Big 12, another team in the Big 12, Coach Aranda from Baylor, he got an extension as well. I think his was to 2029. What is your initial reactions to that, Dave? What do you think about that?
Again, like Fickle, I think it's very well deserved. He turned a 2-win team into the Big 12 champions in a season, essentially. And he built a defense that the Big 12 hasn't had in a very long time. And I think that Baylor will see success to come, but again, it's the Big 12. Like we've been saying, it's tough. It's a really tough conference. It's not because these teams just know how to play each other and they beat up on each other. But I think that he can bring them back to another Big 12 title if the circumstances present themselves in the right way. I think Shaper's a really good quarterback. You just can't use Bohannon as much as you have, and you got to look out for Oklahoma. People are counting Oklahoma out because they lost Riley and they lost 2 of their quarterbacks, but Venables is a very good coach, and they have Dylan Gabriel, who I think is an absolute stud.
Yeah, Kenzie, what do you think?
I think through 2029 might be a bit of an overreaction of this year, because we keep, like, it's beating a dead horse, like it's the Big 12. We could see Baylor rattle off 2 6-win years in a row, and then is the fan base and or the administration going to overcorrect the other way and be like, you want us a Big 12 title in your in infancy of your coaching era? What happened? So I think it might be too long of an extension in this particular case, because I think it was a knee-jerk reaction to the instant success. I'm not saying it's an LSU, they were built for immediate success. I understand they have a lot more in the pipeline than LSU did and does, but I feel like it's a little bit of an overreaction, overcorrection.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Both of you made. I think it's the right thing to do strictly because there needs to be some stability in the Baylor program. You know, you've had a couple of head coaches before him that have had success and then they leave for different reasons. You know, you had Art Briles, obviously with the whole scandal around him. Obviously, he needed to go, but you know he probably should have gone in the college football playoff in 2014. You know, they were ranked. The only thing that took them out of it was not having a conference championship game. You know, so they were fifth. I think they finished fifth that year, and they played in the Cotton Bowl. And then and then he leaves, right? And then you kind of bring in Matt Rule a couple after that, and he takes them to the Sugar Bowl. You know, and he leaves to the NFL, right? And they're kind of done this kind of the same thing. They kind of go up and down, up and down. So now you have some stability, right? You have Dave Aranda, who's brought them back to that Sugar Bowl and actually win this time. You've locked them in and kind of continue to build that program because I think they've been very, very close to break out like a Texas or Oklahoma. I think them and TCU have been that second tier. You know, you have Oklahoma and Texas in the Big 12, and you have TCU and Baylor right behind them. And then you kind of have everybody else, you know, West Virginia, Texas, Texas Tech, you know, so those types of programs. So it's Oklahoma State. So it's very, very interesting to see what's going to happen moving forward, especially taking Texas out, taking Oklahoma out. They're kind of going to be the Baylor statement of the Big 12. You know, and they'll have to compete, like I mentioned, they'll have to compete against TCU. They'll have Cincinnati to worry about, Houston to worry about moving forward. But, you know, you've taken out those two heavyweights that have been there forever, that have dominated the conference the last 10, 15 years, you know, you kind of it's kind of opens up the path for them. So I definitely think it's the right decision to make. You know, you want to make sure that it continues to build, and how far can he take these programs? And let's remember this: there's so how many coaches have signed these extensions and then they end up leaving anyway, right? They can still go to the NFL. They can still, there's other, you know, we've seen was it Lane Kiffin who signed that extension with FAU and then dipped to Ole Miss anyway. So, you know, that doesn't really mean anything, honestly. It really doesn't. He can easily get fired. He can easily leave for the NFL or to another program if he wants to. But at least to have that stability now, I think will definitely benefit that program significantly. And are they the favorites to win the Big 12 next year? Dave, what do you think?
I'd say you gotta have, I don't know what Vegas will have it out as, but for me, I think they're the favorites. It's theirs to lose. They're the defending champions. But again, Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are going to be right up there with them. But yeah, I would say they're my favorite to win the Big 12 again.
Kenzie, what about you?
So, and maybe it's because like I lived in Kansas. I respect Oklahoma State as a school. Almost went there. I think Oklahoma State is due in a sense. Man, they were 2.5 inches from a title. Yeah. They had 4 tries at 2.5 inches. Yeah, so every year it seems like Oklahoma State just reloads the offense in a way that like is super interesting. Like, yeah, you could argue Oklahoma does the same, but I think Oklahoma State is not given the same merit in their reloading capability. So probably bias, I'd put Oklahoma State up there, but obviously Baylor is top 2 in there as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with both of you. I think they would be the favorite as well. I think they have the most, I would say, stability right now. You know, Oklahoma's going through a transition year with new head coach, new coaching staff, new quarterback. Texas, you know, they have the coaching staff there, but you know they're getting a new quarterback in Quinn Ewers, and I mean Quinn Ewers should be very, very good. You know, he's been the number 1 recruit, you know, and he's been kind of sitting in the wings behind at Ohio State. So it's technically this is his freshman season, right? Mm-hmm. He was supposed to leave. This was supposed to be his freshman year anyway because he reclassified to leave high school a year early. So he's basically still a freshman, and he already has a year of college football under his belt. So that's going to be interesting, but it's still more of a transition period. So I think Baylor is going to be in the driver's seat to repeat. You know, there's a lot of things that happened this past season that kind of opened the door for him. A lot of, with Oklahoma losing a couple of games and that the game against Oklahoma State, that was thanks to Oklahoma State for beating Oklahoma, that kind of opened the door for everybody there. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens next year, for sure. So speaking of coaches, kind of staying on this train of coaches, are there any coaches that you think are on the hot seat? What are, we've talked about extending coaches. Now, what are the coaches that could be on their way out if they don't find any success? Kenzie, what do you think? Anybody that comes to mind when you think about somebody on the hot seat?
I personally don't have the belief Scott Frost is on the hot seat, but as the resident transfer portal Nebraska fan, I'll defend him in every possible way. I do believe Scott Frost has to go to a bowl game this year. And he doesn't really have any excuse not to go to a bowl game. We dominated the transfer class. We got a new OC, new wide receiver coach, new special teams coordinator, which our special teams cannot get any worse than they were this year. So I think Scott Frost is set up for success. He's in year 5, I believe. This is his 5th year. He finally has all his recruits, all his players, all his tactics and leadership set in. And if he doesn't get to a bowl game this year, it's inexcusable as a Husker fan. I think everybody the last 4 years thought he should be on the chopping block at the end of every year. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. He had a lot of rebuilding to do, which even Nebraska fans don't realize how big of a rebuilding effort he had to do. So I would say he's on a very mildly warm seat. You win your non-conference games. I mean, I guess you expect to lose to Oklahoma, even though it's in Lincoln, but our schedule gets a lot easier this year. So Scott Frost has got to win 6. I think the expectation, at least for me, would be to win 8. But 6, and if he doesn't win 6, he's gone.
Yeah, definitely needs to be bowl eligible. I think I agree with you 100%. I think Scott Frost is probably number 1 on the hot seat coming into the 2022 season. Another name that comes to mind for me is Jeff Collins from Georgia Tech. After they, he came in kind of changing the program, changing the offense. They went away from the triple option kind of offense to more traditional offense, and it hasn't really worked out. I mean, they're not very good, and they just lost a lot. They're losing a lot of players in the transfer portal. They lost Jahmyr Gibbs, probably was their best players to Alabama. So yeah, it hasn't been very fun, in Atlanta for Georgia Tech. So I definitely think he's up there. I think kind of I don't want to say controversial name, but kind of a dark horse would be Steve Sarkisian. If you're bringing in the number 1 recruited quarterback, and since, I don't know, Trevor Lawrence maybe, you have to succeed, and you're at Texas too. We have this joke every year. This Texas is back. So at what point is that going to be true? They've tried it with a lot of coaches over the years, and it hasn't worked. And every single one of them has gone close, and then it just regressed. So I think Steve Sarkisian needs to show something this year, where maybe win 10 games, maybe reach the Big 12 championship game, or at least get close to it. Maybe a New Year's Six bowl. But I think if he doesn't succeed this year, and Adam, one of our colleagues, Adam, is probably going to hate this conversation about Steve Sarkisian, but if he doesn't succeed this year, I think that there's going to be a conversation to be had about Steve Sarkisian in Austin. So, Dave, what do you think? Who do you think is on the hot seat this year?
Well, I mean, obviously Scott Frost and Sarkisian. I wrote both those guys down. I think both those guys need to make bowl games and have. I think Sark's under more of a microscope because it's Texas. Mm-hmm. Scott Frost is a little bit more leeway because he's a Nebraska guy, but they both need to make bowl games and have much better seasons. For me, I'm going to go back to the Big Ten. I'd say this guy might have the hottest seat in the country. I pretty much think he's gone already. Tom Allen in Indiana. He had probably the best Indiana football season ever. They were a top 15 team. They looked good. They beat Penn State week 1. I almost cried. And then there were high expectations last season. They were coming off, as I said, the best year they've ever had, and they come out and they win 2 games. And I know that Penix got hurt, and I forget their backup's name, but he was awful. I've seen him play a couple of times. But you can't completely shut down when your best player gets hurt, and that's exactly what they did. And now Penix is at Washington. He's completely gone. So they brought in a transfer from Missouri. I don't really know much about him. He didn't play at Missouri. But Tom Allen needs to also, I'd say, if he starts his season out 2-5, somewhere along those lines, he's going to get fired midseason, and the entire program's going to have to reset.
I want to loop back to Sarkisian because I honestly thought he could have been fired at the end of this season. I thought there were some legitimate reasons there. So my question to you, Brian, is you say he has to have success. What is success in the eyes of the big Texas donors who are determining basically if he stays or if he goes? What's success for having this new quarterback, this 5-star stud, and still a decent team at the helm?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and you're bringing in a quarterback. Yeah, he's highly recruited. Yeah, he'll probably enter as he could be considered one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Obviously, we haven't seen him play significant, meaningful snaps, so the trial's still out on that. But I think that I think 10 wins might be a success. Or maybe beat Oklahoma. Just beat Oklahoma. Like if you could beat Oklahoma, that might kind of cool things off a little bit. Like, all right, we're in the right direction. We're on the right track, because I do think that the only way he gets fired, which is why I said kind of a dark horse with Sarkisian. The only way he gets fired is if they have a season that they had this year. They lost to Arkansas, they lost to Oklahoma, they lost to Kansas. That is unacceptable. You can't do that. You really can't do that as the University of Texas. Like that is, losing to Kansas. That's like
at home.
At home at that.
Really bad.
It's like Georgia losing to Vanderbilt, or Alabama losing to Arkansas, even though Arkansas is a lot better this year. That was a lot better last year, but you can't do that. You can't lose to Kansas. So I think you have to at least beat a couple of your rivals, beat a couple of your rivalry games, beat Oklahoma, beat Baylor, beat these types of programs, and then I think 10 wins might do it. If you can even just make it to the title game, and even if you lose to Baylor or whoever, at least if you make it in, that might cool the hot seat off for you. Just how Jim Harbaugh did. Luckily a lot of things happened for Jim Harbaugh to get in the playoff, but he was able to beat Ohio. He beat his rival for the first time. That kind of, all right, cool. They finally beat Ohio State. They made it they won the Big Ten, and then they made it to the playoffs. So that kind of cool things. That even got them NFL offers for doing that. So I think that's what needs to happen with Sarkisian. He needs to win meaningful games, and he needs to have a successful 8, 9, 10 wins. Just show progress. Make it look like you're getting better. And maybe it's 9 wins this year, and then it's 10, 11 wins next year, and moving forward. So, because you do not want to go into the SEC as a 8-4 or 6-6 team. That is definitely not. It's not going to be pretty for you if you're in the SEC you're going to the SEC going 6-6 against in a Big 12 competition, because that's not going to end up well for you. So that's what I think.
So I want to loop it back to you guys with Scott Frost, since I am a Nebraska fan, can't really give an unbiased take on it. You said like if Sarkisian shows improvement, were you guys able to see the improvement of the quality of football Nebraska put out this year? Yes, they went 3-9. They lost all of their games by 9 or fewer points. So were you guys able to see an improvement of the product? Do you think it's headed in the right direction for Scott Frost to succeed? I'm going to stay out of this. I just want to genuinely know an unbiased answer.
They played better football, but it's losing those close games is on the coaching. Like you cannot lose every single game by less than a score, or by 1 score. You just can't do it. And they did play better. They did look better, but they lost Adrian Martinez, which You don't think that's? I think it's I mean, he's all right, but I forgot who'd you bring in?
We brought in the Texas quarterback and
Yeah.
brought in the Florida State quarterback, and we have a 4-star Logan Smothers, who's now been in the program for 2 years, was taking some snaps last year. So we have a packed quarterback room. We have a packed running back room. I don't think Adrian's a lot from the Nebraska fan perspective. Adrian never had a clutch bone in his body. If he had,
definitely.
Until we win 2 or 3 of those games, like, yeah, you can blame some of it on the coaching, but that I'll stay off of Adrian for your guys' purposes on your take.
Yeah, he needs to win those games, and he needs. I would say 6 games is fair because I know his contract is through 2026, somewhere around there. But yeah, you can't go 3-9 again. If he goes 3-9, then even if they're playing good football, you have to win the games.
Yeah, I agree 100%. You lose close games. It's multiple close games is because of it's all coaching at that point. You lose a couple of close games, you could be unlucky, but if you consistently lose close games, it's on coaching. So I do think that 6 wins will be sufficient. I think getting into a bowl game might get them there, might get them a little bit cooler. But yeah, they paid him a lot of money. They brought him in, he'd had a lot of success. And that kind of goes to show we've had a couple of G5 coaches go into Power 5 programs and just not, do well. You've seen Tom Herman to Texas, Scott Frost now with Nebraska. It's kind of weird. It's a little, I don't know if it's a trend at this point, but you definitely need to he needs to get that next step out of his players, and that next, because your talent is a lot better at Nebraska than it was at UCF. So you have to get that next step out of them. So I do think that 6 wins, get in a bowl, and that's why when you talk about success and you talk about what the leeway is you don't want to. Obviously, you need to win the Big 12, or the Big 10. You can't tell them that because you're not going to go from 3-9 to winning the Big 10. But you can say, get in a bowl game, win a bowl game at least, even if it's 6-6 or 7-5 record, but you win your bowl game. Yeah, just something, win something.
Some hardware.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what will show Scott Frost, and I think they're definitely capable of doing that. They did get better as the year went on. That loss to Illinois was atrocious. Illinois went on to lose to UTSA the next week anyway. So that was horrible. That was a bad loss. But
I could have a whole one of these podcasts like dissecting each one of the losses and like why it happened. And from my take, what Nebraska circles have been saying is you go from like losing by a lot to losing the close games, and then you win a couple of the close games, and then so we believe we're getting there. I was just curious if you guys thought, as an outsider, the program was also getting there.
And it may very well be. They did show promise towards the end of the year. They didn't result to a lot of wins, but they did play a lot better. But
they were a lot better.
Yeah,
that before, I'd say.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it only goes so far. You actually have to win the games next time.
It's hard to get worse than they were 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, they did play better football.
They definitely did. So Kenzie, you kind of mentioned transfer portal a little bit. So let's kind of transition to that. It's post National Signing Day. The transfers and all that kind of slowed down already. We're kind of past that stage. There's a couple names out there that are still, JT Daniels, and there's a few others that are still kind of lingering, see where they're going to go. But overall, it looks like the big hitters have already made their decision. So let's talk about who won the transfer portal this year. It seems that every year it's getting more and more important to do well in the transfer portal. We saw, Alabama, Jamison Williams, what he did this year, Georgia, Darion Kendrick, and these got teams to have success. So who do you think won the transfer portal, Kenzie? Let's start with you.
I think the small guys in the SEC did a really good job to chip away the Ole Misses, the Arkansas. Yeah. They grabbed a couple to help them be more competitive. Obviously, I don't think it's the tide shifting but I think they did a really good job. I think Nebraska is going to sneak in under the radar of having done a really good job with our new wide receiver coach, Mickey. Brought in a lot of his wide receiver recruits from LSU, got some 4-stars in the running back position. I don't think a lot of eyes are on Nebraska, so that's why I think they'll go a little bit under the radar with this, and that's why I think the SEC small guys have a little bit more attention on them, which is why they might have signed a couple bigger guys than anybody else. But those are my top picks, like small guys in the SEC. Biased pick in Nebraska, but I do think they did. I do think, like, unbiased, they did a very good job getting what they needed. So.
Yeah, definitely. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Small guys in the SEC, definitely. You could throw South Carolina in there. They got Spencer Rattler and a couple other really nice players. I'm going to kind of transition towards the Pac-12 for a little bit. USC, I think, is an obvious big winner. Lincoln Riley can say the transfer portal. He can complain as much as he wants, but it helped him out the most out of any program, I'd say, easily. He gets Caleb Williams, and a huge pickup was Travis Dye flipping from Oregon to USC. I think he's going to be a huge part of that offense. Caleb Williams is a stud. He's just so good, and he has Lincoln Riley's offense. He knows it. It's like that was the big winner. And I think a little-known guy, Cameron Ward, going to Washington State from Incarnate Word, he's going to really help that program. And I think that, I mean, he led the FCS in touchdowns. The guy is just a baller, and I think that he will transition really well. And they won 7 games last year. They're going to be dangerous this year. They're not going to win the Pac-12, but I think they can knock some teams out. Like, let's say they play USC at home. I don't really know their schedule. I don't know whether they play home or away. But I think at home, under the lights, Pac-12 after dark, you never know what's going to happen. I think they can make some noise. And I'm just going to shout out Penn State. It's the only time I'll do it because they had a good recruiting class, and they bother me a lot what they do. But bringing in Mitchell Tinsley from Western Kentucky is gigantic for them. He can come in. He can be a Jahan Dotson-like guy. He had, in his last game at Western Kentucky, 7 catches, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns. The guy makes big plays. He had a better – I would say Bailey Zappi was a better quarterback than Sean Clifford is now. But if you give Drew Aller a shot and he can throw the ball to Tinsley, he opens it up for Parker Washington. He opens it up for Keandre Lambert-Smith and Brenton Strange. I just think that he's going to have a humongous impact on this offense.
I guess I never really considered USC as the transfer portal with as much as they like flipped Lincoln's own recruits that
they got everybody from
at OU. It just like never really clicked in my head like, oh yeah, I guess that's also applicable here. But that's a really good point about USC.
Yeah, and I kind of want to go with USC as well, just because I feel like they'll have it is in terms of impact on the specific program. I think they'll be a lot better this year, but I hate to do it, and I really don't want to. I really didn't want to pick this team, but I'm going to go with Alabama. I hate it because it's Alabama, and of course, right? You know, they got Jahmyr Gibbs, who's probably one of the most dynamic players in the country from Georgia Tech. You know, he can run the ball, he can return kicks, he can play receiver. They got Eli Ricks from LSU, probably one of the best corners in the league. In the country. So, and then obviously Jermaine Burton, which still, as a Georgia fan, that makes no sense to me, but I get whatever. You know, you just won a national championship with Georgia. You just you were our best receiver all season. You had an impact all season. So like you weren't getting the ball. Yeah, he only had I think he had like 500 and something passing catch yards, and then he had 5 touchdowns. Yeah. So you're probably going to double that at Alabama, but still you just beat this team for a national championship, and then you just go to that team to play with them, and whatever, man. But I think that
tell us how you really feel, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever.
Not fair, man. I guess you'd rather Bryce Young than Stetson Bennett, but still.
Hey, Stetson Bennett beat Bryce Young for a natty, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Stetson Bennett is just the most average quarterback you could possibly.
That guy's a legend. They should build a statue of him.
It's so
Everyone's saying
funny.
he's so bad, and then he pulls it out.
It's so funny how you have like all the great quarterbacks that have gone through Georgia. You know, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Murray, Jake Fromm, Justin Fields, Jacob Eason, JT Daniels, and Stetson freaking Bennett is the one that wins the Natty. That's hilarious.
Awesome.
But before I get off on this tangent, yeah. So I think that Alabama definitely, obviously, they just reloaded significantly. They traded out. You know, they're losing they're losing Jamison Williams, and they're replacing with Jermaine Burton. They're losing some of these corners. They're replacing them with Eli Ricks. So you know, I think they're definitely going to be better this year than they were last year, or next season that they were this past season. Another one is I think I agree with you guys about the SEC. Arkansas did pretty well. You know, they got Jadon Hazelwood from Oklahoma. He was a 5-star receiver. They got Drew Sanders, a linebacker from Alabama. You know, so they did very well. I think that they're going to be a lot better this year. And I don't think they're going to make an impact in the SEC West. Obviously, Alabama, LSU, all those guys are going to be a lot better. Ole Miss is going to be better. They did really well in recruiting as well. They got Jackson Dart in the transfer portal. But I think, back to my point, is the one that made the biggest impact to their program from one year to another is USC. I think they're definitely put themselves in the conversation for winning the Pac-12 and maybe squeaking a playoff spot. I don't want to go that far. It's going to be a transition year, but they're definitely got a lot better. So
I was like, that's a hot take to.
I'm not saying that they're going to make the playoff. Yeah. No, they're definitely not making the playoff, but they'll definitely be a lot better than they have been for sure.
They'll be the first rankings that come out. They'll be in the top 10, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Just like how Penn State always is like, oh, they're number 4, and then they'll lose the next week. That's how it's going to go.
Yeah,
they'll be the same way. Exactly.
No, I agree 100%. So yeah, so that's pretty good. There's a lot of different teams got a lot better with the transfer portal. So I think it's showing out how significant the transfer portal has become.
It's a wild concept that's come to fruition for college football. Like, yeah, it has. You don't have to be good at recruiting anymore. Like, you could just focus like getting transfers in, and you could have an LSU year 1 year where you're just locked and loaded for a year to win a natty. And for some programs that they'd be like, hell yeah, like we have a natty that we can talk about for the rest forever. Exactly. Like LSU, you know, they got their one and done. I mean, he played there for 2 years, but they got Joe Burrow and won a natty and dipped to the NFL, and you know, they went back to being mid. So So that was very good conversation. Let's finish this up a little bit of a fun conversation. We were talking about this. We tweeted it from the transfer portal Twitter account. We talked about it in the group chat about it as well. So let's kind of explain it a little bit more. We put out a tweet and we said one gotta go with college football tradition. So there's 4 of them. So we got Midnight Yell from Texas A&M, the Wisconsin Jump Around, the Penn State Whiteout, and the Virginia Tech Enter Sandman. So very controversial tweet. There's a lot of feedback and a lot of people having very different opinions about this. So let's kind of explain our decision. So mine was Midnight Yell. And the reason why I said Midnight Yell, it's very iconic. It's an iconic tradition. I'm not diluting the tradition specifically. But for me, if it doesn't take place either during the game or right before the game, it doesn't count. Midnight Yell, it's the night before, or, you know, and they have these weird stories and they do this thing that they do, whatever that is. It's weird and it's cringy, and it doesn't happen pre-game and it doesn't happen during the game. So get that out of here. Texas A&M is weird. I know we got some colleagues that are currently at A&M, but like Texas A&M is their own little thing.
It doesn't make sense to me. It's just so strange.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure they're like
weird, so
do we all get rid of it? Did we all agree to get rid of that one?
No, I said Jump Around.
Why'd you say that?
Yeah, why'd you say Jump Around?
I have had a lot of people, I haven't been there for Jump Around. I've had a lot of family and friends be there for Jump Around, and it's kind of alluded to in some of our responses. Like, if Wisconsin's losing, the students are gone, like it's lame. And my point with it was, how's jump around any different than scoring a touchdown? Like everybody's jumping, everybody's screaming, the stadium's rocking. Jump around doing the same thing in a dead ball time. So it's not really doing anything. You can argue Midnight Yell isn't doing anything either. I just don't think jump around it's not like a blue blood tradition. It's not, I don't think it does anything. I'm also a Nebraska fan, so I have some beef with that take, but I truly believe it's not a tradition. Everybody plays that song. It would be like Nebraska claiming serious like Chicago Bulls as like our thing. It's not. Every high school in the country uses it. Like other college teams use it. Like everybody plays jump around occasionally. Like it's not. There's nothing special to it.
Sure, that's fair. Dave, what's your explanation on Midnight Yell?
I mean, I pretty much feel the same way as you do. Like it's just like, I guess not. I mean, I'm a Big Ten guy, so anytime anyone says it just means more, I'm like, can you stop? But yeah, all the weird SEC, like the midnight. It's not during the game. That's like, that was my main thing. Like, I just think that it's weird that all these kids go to the stadium the night, but like, go out. What do you like?
It's a Friday night, bro.
I don't like. Oh, you're playing Arkansas tomorrow. You're both 6-5. I don't want to sit in the stadium and scream with like the whole. I mean, I'm sure it's cool if you're there, and if you go like once before a big game, it's probably awesome. Like if let's say you're there, I mean they're gonna be good this year, but when they're like, I don't know, they have like mid seasons and they play teams that aren't as good. I just don't see how you can get into that every game. Especially before the game. I'm just happy no one got rid of whiteout because that's the most electric atmosphere in anything I've ever been to.
I saw some takes on Twitter about that, and I was like, you obviously don't know football enough to say whiteout's your elimination. I think like whiteout's probably the safest one of those. It's because
people hate Penn State, and like I know why. Like people hate Penn State for a ton of different reasons. Like we also get called culty and all that stuff, which like I can't disagree with. But if you are there, or like if you like college football and you don't have like an unnecessary beef against us, then it's like everybody's wearing white, everyone's tanked, everyone's going nuts. It's the best thing ever. I mean, I'm gonna go again this year. I go every year pretty much. It's the best.
That's something I want to experience as well. And my last point before we wrap this up is I was watching like best college football traditions on Twitter, and I literally get goosebumps with 95% of them. And Midnight Yell was on there, and my goosebumps went away. Like it was because it's just not. I mean, I know there's a couple of Texas A&M fans in our group. You know, they're probably going to be upset about this, but look, it's just nothing special. At least for me, the tradition, the thing that separates college football with the NFL is the tradition on game day, at the game, the atmosphere, the raucous crowd. I mean, it's incredible. There's so many other ones out there that are just better, and it kind of, man, once you're in the stadium, it gives you goosebumps. So that's what I think. So that's
get everybody to do it before the game starts. I feel like, and that would be 1,000 times cooler if you did it in game or before the game. It's an empty stadium. You got 4 guys in like fatigue screaming at you.
It's exclusive is what it is. So like if you're not a part of it, you don't know it, and you don't like know the feeling.
Yeah.
So like I don't know how something exclusive could be considered a tradition outside of campus.
I agree with that 100%. We can all participate in the Penn State whiteout, but we cannot participate in a Midnight Yell. So
everybody I hate jump around, but like
if you were there,
anybody can do jump around. Yeah. Anybody can get hyped to enter Sandman. Anybody can participate in whiteout. Like Texas A&M is exclusive in this tradition, and I think that's why people can't get behind it. And that's why Texas A&M is weird to a lot of people.
Yeah. No, definitely. No, you both make some great points. So, and with that, I know it's kind of, like I said, it's a very slow period in college football right now. We're right in the cusp of spring ball starting in the next few weeks. We're kind of in the middle between after signing period and before spring ball starts. So there was not a lot to talk about, but we made some pretty good conversation happen, which is pretty good. I was a little nervous, like, man, I don't even know how we can get 30 minutes of conversation.
We got an hour.
We got an hour in, so that's great. You know, y'all were for y'all's first time on the pod. Y'all were amazing. That was a great conversation to have with both of you. It was a lot of fun. I thank you guys so much for coming on. I hope this is the first of many for both of you. Like I said, it was, we went from 4 or 5 people to now where I think we're over 10 now. So it's great. We're continuing to grow, and we're glad to have you guys on board. And we're happy to have you on. So thank you guys for being on for your first time, and I hope you guys had as much fun as I did.
Yeah, I did.
Great time. Happy to be here.
I'll be back.
For sure.
Hopefully, yeah, I hope so.
Yeah,
So, you know what? I'm
hopefully.
out. That was one. I'm out. Leaving the team.
Bye.
I'm out here.
Thanks. Cameo.
Yeah. So, well, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you guys watch this. Follow us on Twitter. The Transport Portal. You can look up Transport Portal. We're on there. YouTube. There's a lot of different platforms that we're on. A lot of different things that we do. So give us a shout out. Give us a like. Give us a follow. And you guys want to plug your while you guys are here, why don't you guys plug your Twitters as well?
All my socials are the same. At KenzArlt, KenzArlt. I tweet a lot about sports. That's basically all I tweet about. So I'm sorry if you don't like Nebraska or Duke or soccer.
I'll plug my Twitter. It's a go, and it's at @fat_Dave_. I've had that since I was like 14. Everyone loves it. And follow the Transfer Portal Instagram. We just launched it at @TPortalCFB. We're going to get some good stuff firing on there soon. Yeah,
definitely. You beat me to it. Yeah. At @TPortalCFB is our Twitter and Instagram. We're powered by NoContextCFB. So give them a follow as well at NoContextCFB. A lot of great stuff coming up. We're growing. We're getting better. We're getting crazier. So there could be a lot of cool stuff coming up. So give us a follow. Give us a shout out. Tell your friends. Tell your family. But thank you guys for listening. You guys have a great day. And we'll see you guys next week.